to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Gold Mine. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today, and I am excited. We got Greg Lappin coming in, and I've been trying to get this scheduled for a little while, so I am stoked that we got you. Now, while I am stoked, y'all should be too. Do the things, like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, Wednesdays for The Gold Mine, Fridays for The Collective, and we're going to be talking about what is a good man. So if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section. We can hit on those throughout. Otherwise, we will be chit-chatting our way through the day. Greg, give us a quick 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm down here in just your southern neighbors. I'm in Utah right now, and I spent a career mostly in law enforcement. Did some contracting overseas for the U.S. government at a pretty high level. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, own a couple different Jiu-Jitsu academies across the country. And I'm out here now running Fieldcraft Survival, running the Jiu-Jitsu program as well as the whole company of Fieldcraft Survival. You know,
Bam.
That's me.
Loving life. I like it. Shaun, how's the mountains treating you?
Things are good out here. And this is an interesting topic today. Actually, as you know, Chance, I don't normally spend any time doing research before we jump into topics. But today I spent about 90 minutes sniffing around on the subject of what does it mean to be a good man, or what is a good man. Tell you what, as I said to my wife just before I jumped into this podcast, I said, hey, listen, do you have any tips for me on what it means to be a good man? Because I just spent 90 minutes sniffing around all the historical, all the biblical, all of the corporate, all of the modern, all of the ancient. No one's got an answer. No one has a freaking answer. There is no one answer. No. And depending on who you ask, what you think, there's so many answers. So this is an interesting topic. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
I'm excited for this. So, let's go right off the bat. What do you guys think a good man, when you first read that topic and you're like, oh man, a good man, what even is that? What was your first thought, Greg?
My initial thought, and it's funny because I've been having this conversation the last couple of days with some of the stuff that I've been dealing with just in my business life, personal life, etc. To me, a good man is someone who stands by their principles, has strong values and principles, beliefs, and stands by them, regardless of the outside pressure that is placed upon them. You know, they don't bend a knee. They don't fold because someone offers them money or someone tries to put their thumb on them. They stand by their principles. They're authentic, meaning they truly have confidence and trust and belief in the person they are, the man they are. They don't try to put on a character or a front. They're authentic, they're transparent, and they're honest. And that doesn't necessarily even mean that you and I, or that we'll get along with them, right? Because they may have different values or different principles than we do. But I think if you stand by your principles, you stand by your values, you're authentic and transparent, we don't need to agree with each other. But to me, that's kind of like the overwhelming theory.
I love it. Being able to almost nod at your enemy kind of deal of like, we may not agree, but all right.
But I respect
you. Yeah, 100%. Shaun, what was your first thoughts?
Well, I've got similar thoughts to Greg as well, because universally, I do believe that there's a model for what it means to be a good man. However, as I've already stated, historically till modern times, that version has shifted, not maybe significantly, but it's shifted in the cultural norms or societal norms. And so what I did start thinking about was, as Greg's, he's put out a good general framework. Then I was thinking like, okay, if it's universal, if being a good man has a universal model, does the universal model always apply universally? So what I'm saying is this: perhaps there's a primary model of being a good man, a universal model, but then there's a secondary model. That's the nuance of things that is applied in each specific circumstance or scenario. And so I think maybe you've got to show up as a generally good man, but then you've got to adapt in the moment to the nuance of what you're facing, which I do believe muddies the definition of what it means to be a good man. Because from an outside perspective, if you're a casual observer, maybe you'll just only see the big, bold, universal models of what a good man is. But the nuanced model, the secondary model that changes constantly throughout the day with each individual or each scenario, I think that's maybe an interesting aspect of what it means to be a good man.
I love the fact that you brought up a nuance. I mean, you pretty much bring up nuance all the time. The concept of understanding what a man is, not only what they are, but I think at the root of it is also what we're capable of. Because if you're incapable, it's hard to stand on your beliefs because there's no capacity to back it up, if that makes sense. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that. Greg, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so I had an interesting conversation with a good friend of mine, Greg Anderson, not too long ago, and we basically were discussing modern times, and I mean, I think throughout time, but modern times lack a certain repercussion nowadays, where in past they had it. So men will make decisions based on two things. Men will make decisions on either their moral and ethical beliefs and values, or the threat of repercussion, right? So a guy can do the right thing in a tense moment because he's got strong ethics, strong morals, strong values, and he's just going to do it. He's got that intestinal fortitude. Or he might not have that intestinal fortitude, not have those values, those ethics, those morals, but he knows if he doesn't do the right thing, you might come along and punch me in the face. So there's a threat of a consequence, which is why I think we see a lot of, in the US, a lot of our, and I hate using the term elites, but our political and wealthy elites, they get away and they do whatever they want. And they take advantage of they take advantage of their position. They take advantage of the American people. They take advantage of their monetary access, etc. Right. And they obviously, and not everyone, right? I'm generalizing, but they're not doing the right thing because of morals and ethics, and there's no threat of repercussion to them. So what makes them make the right decision?
Accountability is such a big thing. Not only do we talk about this quite a bit on the show, accountability for sure. And I think it goes back to, I can't remember if it's Occam's razor, but power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yep.
And that's it's an interesting piece to take this. Shaun, you got any points on this?
Well, just as Greg said, it is a generalization. It's a good generalization that someone who's in a position of authority or power, or someone who has a lot of money, we'll call it resources, they can stray from what it means to be a good man, for sure. But then so can a person who's got $0 and zero resources. So, you can apply a universal split between your Darth Vader and your Luke Skywalker, or you're good, you're bad. And that can be done without money easily. What is interesting is that when you add a lot of money into that same scenario, now there's that provides a certain amount of visibility and a certain amount of influence. And so when someone, let's say Darth Vader's now got $1 billion and he's on some social media channel where he's doing, I don't know, moonwalking, Michael Jackson moonwalking, and he's doing all of the finger guns and he's doing all the things that are right, that are influential. So in essence, Darth Vader's using a massive advertising budget to come across as cool and follow me because I'm the guy. So money or power is what I'm really talking about. As a good man can be used well, or as a man who was raised wrong can be like devastating. And so what it means to be a good man has got less to do with money and has more to do with how you were brought up and who you were brought up around. And so whether you've got $1 or $1 billion, that doesn't make you good or bad. That just gives you the capacity to do good or bad.
Right.
I'm liking this. Now, I got a couple of videos that we can touch on that I want to get into eventually, but any other thoughts on that before we jump into it? I think we've touched on it, but Greg, you got any additional thoughts on this?
I agree with all that. And it's a matter of what are your principles and ethics? And do you have that intestinal fortitude to stand by them? Or are you just afraid of repercussions? And the more powerful you are, Shaun, like you said, the more powerful you are, the more wealthy, the more influential you are, the less chance you have of getting negative repercussions by doing something wrong. You know,
I like this. I'm going to liken this to violence. Let's put it this way: is that if with all the training that I have, with all the training you have, with all the training Shaun has, if we wanted to hurt people, we could pretty easily. And the thing that holds us back is we know that it's wrong. At least in my mind, I know it's wrong to just randomly hurt people. But that's part of growing up, I think. That's part of learning how to interact with a society is that, and again, we all came from a generation that's a slightly different than now, is that we used to have consequences. If I pissed somebody off in the school field, I got punched in the face. I got jumped by a bunch of his friends, that kind of thing. Whereas nowadays, there's less of that. But when it does happen, it's extreme violence. You see, 7, 8 kids jumping one. You see people bringing weapons. You see all these other issues. And I think that has to do with the fact that there's just less consequences growing up. At least that's my thoughts on that. What do you think, Shaun? I'm going to come to you first on this one.
So rephrase your question so it's shorter and more directed, please.
Raj, so do you think that the lack of accountability growing up is what we're seeing right now in schools where perhaps the violence is more excessive than it used to be when we were growing up?
So I will say this, that, that is a thing, but your question actually took me in a bit of a different direction. So let me throw this back at you and see what you think. So perhaps it's less about the understanding of violence, and it's more about the misunderstanding of how to grow up. And so let's go back a couple of generations, and you grew up on the playground. But today you grow up on your iPad. And so maybe half the kids are on the playground, but the other half are just nerding out on the sidelines, on their iPads or on their phones or whatever. They're not actually on the playground. So they're not growing up on a playground. They're growing up next to a playground, but on their phone. And so the lessons that you learn, the punches that you get, all of the stuff that used to happen is different now. And it's being replaced by something else. It's being replaced by the digital device where kids are growing up. And so the lessons you learn on a playground are now learned on the social media playground. And those lessons are different. And I believe that is, some of the problems we have in society are contingent upon how kids are being raised digitally versus organically next to the monkey bars. So that's my thought. What do you think?
I'm going to pass it to Greg, and then I'm going to talk about what I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with Shaun more. My kids, we don't have a video game console in the house, and never have. We've never had a video game console in the house. My kids, as they got older, got iPads, but for learning and learning games. So the only games that were allowed on the iPads were, math or reading, writing, arithmetic type stuff on those iPads. Long road trips or whatnot, they would get iPad time, but it was based off of reading time, actual reading a book, reading text. So you get to, and then they could play the learning games on their iPads. My son just turned 13, and I just got him his first phone. He's never had a phone before then. And there's some pretty strict rules with how he's allowed to use it and when he's allowed to use it. And it's for communication. It's not for scrolling. He doesn't have any social media apps on there. He's not allowed to. It's not for playing video games on the phone. It is for a communication device. So he was allowed the freedom to go out with his friends to the playground and play pickup football or soccer or go build a fort in the woods, which is all the stuff that my son does with his friends down here in Utah. And then if there's an issue, he can call me or I can call him. Hey, dude, time to come home. I agree with both sentiments, Chance, that I do think there's less accountability from parents raising their kids nowadays from what I see. But also the big thing for me is what I see is there's less struggle. There's less struggle with kids nowadays. Everything's handed to them. Everything's given to them. So there's no struggle. There's no adversity in their lives. You know, you see how many, let me ask you this, how many active shooters or crazy kids with a gun have we seen gone into the poorest public education, public schools in inner cities?
I couldn't even tell you.
I couldn't tell you one. The active shooters, these shootings happen in affluent, mostly white communities and schools. There's no adversity. They're not getting into fights. They're not getting jumped. They're bullying each other online through their social media playground, like Shaun said, and there's no actual struggle. Whereas in the inner city, there's struggle every day. These kids don't have iPads, maybe. These kids aren't getting phones at a young age. These kids are playing basketball and getting shoulder checked and then getting into fist fights on the basketball court during recess. So they grow up with more adversity and more struggle, and they don't immediately, there is an understanding of violence and what it does and what it's for. And what I would consider is justly dosed violence versus unjustly dosed violence, right? It's like, hey, you offended me by this comment. I don't like it. We're going to fight now. Or, hey, you offended me. I'm going to go shoot up the whole classroom.
So it's interesting that you bring this up, and the fact that, you know, I think the beautiful part about this is that what makes a good man, in my mind, when we first started talking about this, when I first came up with the concept, was the struggle, the adversity, the difficulty, all the things that we've been through that have turned me into the man that I am today. Now, whether I'm considered a good man, that's to be debated, right? Depends on who you talk to and what their beliefs are. But I see myself as a good man. I'm trying to teach my kids how to be good men so that they can teach their kids to be good men. And as Shaun likes to say on a pretty regular basis, he's teaching his kids how to raise kids rather than teaching his kids how to be kids.
I like that.
And I find that the best way, and I'm going to go into a video with this one, is that it takes the internal struggle, takes the ability to step into yourself and go, okay, where am I failing? Where am I not getting anywhere to become a good man, at least in my mind? So I'm going to play this video and then we're going to talk about it.
All right.
Here we go.
Flip of a switch moment that permanently changed your life or perspective?
It was my first day in therapy, and my therapist said, "You seem really well adjusted for someone who's never gone to therapy. Why are you here?" And I said, "I'm a good husband, I'm a good father, I'm a good friend, I'm a good employee, but I want to be great at all those things, and I feel like if I could be great at those by myself, I would have been by now, so I'm getting help." And she said, "Employee is someone you are for your job, husband is someone you are for your wife, father is someone you are for your son, and friend is someone you are for your friends. Who are you for yourself? Who are you outside of those roles?" And then the waterworks happened, and I heard myself say, "I'm not sure there's much of a person at the end of all that." And that was the beginning of me figuring out who I was at 30-something years old. Everything changed after.
Bam. Let's talk about it. Greg, what do you think?
How long do I have? Because you want to learn about Greg. You want Greg to get vulnerable online. We can talk about some stuff because that resonates big time.
That's what we do here. Giver.
So I started seeing my therapist in 2019, I started seeing my therapist. I had left overseas contracting. I'd come back living in the US again. I was not on I was not basically doing a special operations job anymore and on the tip of the spear, right? And now I'm just neighbor Greg. Hey, can I borrow some eggs? Neighbor, howdy, you know? And I was like, what is my purpose? Well, who am I? I do nothing now. Like, what value do I bring to anybody? And I really struggle with it. And obviously this is the story I told myself. And I was very angry, and I was drinking a lot, and I was probably not a very good man. I was flip of the switch, aggressive and angry. I was not a good husband. I was not a very good father. I was absent to all those things. And I just, I was still a physical, mental, what I consider a physical, mental savage. I could do my job and do it well, but I was not around for anybody else around me. And it all came to a head one evening at a kind of a family get-together, family party, where two guys that had been drinking a little bit were acting inappropriate with some women. I stepped in, and I basically had some words, had some physical confrontation. I took the high road, separated it, and I told my wife, I set my alarm on my phone, and I set my alarm for 10 minutes, and I walked into the back bedroom, and I sat down. I said, you have 10 minutes to go out there and tell those guys how effing dangerous I am, because when my alarm goes off, I'm coming out of the room, and if they're still here, I'm going to kill them. I'm not going to beat them up. I'm not going to fight them. I'm going to kill them. And I hit start, and I sat down just like that. No yelling, no nothing, just very, very calmly. And that seemed pretty reasonable and logical to me at the time. And obviously she went out there, and they had left. So I didn't have to do any of that. And it all came down. It was like, you need to go talk to someone. And, I was the guy, the typical barrel-chested freedom fighter, type A, Rod. If he mentions this or talks about medication, I'm going to punch him and walk out. And he was the coolest guy I ever met. And I loved talking to him. So I went and talked to him again and again. And next thing you know, he's like giving me all these tools. And, he's like, you know what I'm an expert in? He's like, I don't know what you went through, Greg. I don't know what you're dealing with. But you know what I'm an expert in is I'm an expert in the brain. Bingo. He's an expert in something. So he may be vastly different from us, but he is a subject matter expert in his own right. And he is a great man. And, it came up one of the sessions we were in, I always said, I'm the guy. For the last 20 years of my career, I've pretty much had to be perfect every day. Because if you screw up, you're off the team. If you screw up, you're out of that job. You're out of that unit. You don't have a chance to mess up. You got to be perfect. And I said, I've always been the guy. I'm everyone's guy. I'm my kid's guy. I'm my wife's guy. I'm my friend's guy. I'm my teammate's guy. I'm the guy everyone comes to. I was like, where's my effing guy? Where's my guy? Like, I don't have a guy. And then the waterworks started, right? Like he says in there. And, I never cried in front of anybody until I was 40 years old. Until I was 40, I never cried in front of anybody. Now I cry in front of everyone at the drop of a hat. I hug my brothers. I tell them I love them, like whatever, because I know what I am. And I'm comfortable, truly comfortable now, I think for the first time in a full lifetime of being an adult. I'm the first time ever I'm actually comfortable with who I am. I know what I am. I know what I'm capable of, not just from a physical aspect. And I don't mean capable of like the capability of bringing violence, but I mean the capability of spreading love, the capability of building people up, the capability of like showing others what they're capable of, So it's something I think comes with time. I think it comes with growing up, but it comes with growing up through adversity. My son at 13 is a vastly, vastly different young man than I was at 13, because my son's grown up in the jiu-jitsu academy since he was 5 years old, training and competing. If you met my son, he's going to carry on a full adult conversation with you. He's going to look you in the eye. He's going to shake your hand, and you'll be able to talk to him like an adult. And then when I come around, I go, hey, the men are about to talk, buddy. He'll, okay, Pop, and he'll leave. Because he understands the difference still. But he grew up with Now it is manufactured struggle. It is manufactured adversity. But if you've ever been on the mats, you know your body doesn't know the difference. Your brain doesn't know the difference, right? So, it's one of those things. I don't know. That's a long roundabout, but I think therapy is a good thing, and it quite literally has saved my life, quite literally. So,
I love it. I went through a similar period with my therapist that I got. I'm glad that the first one you went to worked.
I'll tell you what, me too, because sorry, not to jump back in, but I also went to a couples therapist that I stood up and I said, all right, look, you and I aren't married. You speak to me like that one more time, I'm going to knock your effing teeth out. And then I'm going to walk out of this office. And I looked down at my wife and I said, I'm done here. You're welcome to stay and talk to him in the office. But if I stay here, I'm going to put him in the hospital. So that was our first couples therapist. So it's not always golden.
Yeah. And that's, I tell people that a lot, is that, when you start therapy, there's going to be some people out there that you just don't connect with. And sometimes it's going to be combative. Other times it's just going to be like, this person doesn't get me or whatever, but you keep going until you find somebody that works for you. Shaun, you got any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah. Do you know who works for you? Yourself, if you spend enough time doing it. So there's that. So if you can't afford a therapist, start checking in with you. So I think the question was when was a time in your life when a switch flipped and you had a big realization about what it means to be a good man? Yeah. And so, I think there's a number of times in my life where I've had that happen, that switch get flipped. And the one that comes to mind, based on what Greg has just been saying and Chance, as you've relayed as well, is when our first son was born. And so that was over 21 years ago. And up until that point, I was a different guy. But the moment that I held him in my hand for the first 3-4 seconds, bam, I was now a different guy. And so I wasn't a good guy or a bad guy. I was just instantly a different guy. And that different guy, that new guy, we'll call him. And by the way, I was like 40. And so when I was 40 having my first kid, I had this realization of, I got to make some changes. And that realization hit me like a lightning bolt from somewhere out there in the universe, penetrated my prefrontal cortex and kind of woke me up. And I didn't know what it meant when I said, I got to do things differently. That's what I said in my head. I just didn't know what that meant. What I did know was I had this little package in my hands that was now a whole bunch of new responsibility. Or I felt like I've got to do things even better, whatever that means. And that's what I've tried to do. And so to Greg's point, our sons, we've got 2 sons. They were raised on the BJJ mats. They were raised, I think, to be good young men. And much like yourself, it's funny, Greg, that you said, at 13, you look down, or maybe you look him in the eye nowadays and say, Pop's got to have a little chat with the boys. So hit the road. It's man talk. I used to have to do the same thing as well, except, our youngest son was out on a drop zone with me over the last 3 years. And the first time he bumped into some of my old cronies who know the young Shaun, not the modern Shaun. They were telling all kinds of stories about young Shaun to my son. And so that was just a different evolution. That was a different switch being flipped. And so I think that my point is this: throughout our lives, we should have these significant moments, whether it's good or bad, whether you have to sit in a bedroom and set a 10-minute alarm and see what's up. These moments are moments that shouldn't be glossed over or overlooked or pretended that they didn't happen. They're things to really, really bear down and chew on and really do some kind of deep introspection to see what the lesson is in that grand moment, whatever the grand moment is for each man out there. Don't ever let the moment slip by freaking grab it by the throat and start choking it to see what lessons it's going to give you.
Yeah. And I like the fact that you brought up good or bad, because I find I was actually just telling somebody on the mats earlier today is that when you start doing something new, it's always going to get worse before it gets better. And a lot of that is because you got to dig yourself out of the hole that you're in. To a similar degree, the light switch for me was when I walked into my oldest son. He's 11 now, but when he was a baby, maybe 2, a toddler, I guess, I walked into the room and he flinched just for me walking in the room. And I was like, that's not on. That's not okay. Now I got to freaking start. I got to figure out something, because he was scared of me. And I was similar to what you were talking about, Greg, walking around with my chest out and thinking I was the man and all tough and angry and just rage all over the place. So there's times where you got to look at yourself and go, man, I screwed this up hard. How do I turn this around? Where do I even begin? How do I get to a point where, my kids enjoy me when they see me come into the room and they smile rather than flinch? That's a big gap. It takes a while to develop out of that area. So I'm glad you guys brought that up, and I'm wondering.
So Chance, you were the moment, and you've told that story. I've heard that story a handful of times, of course, over the last couple of years of podcasting with you. And so, at that point, what did you tell yourself? How did you define yourself in the moment? If you were going to give yourself a descriptor, a single sentence descriptor, it probably wasn't, man, I'm really nailing this. I'm a good man in this moment, right? So what did
Correct.
you tell yourself?
I told myself that this is not the father I would like. And that was the big one that changed me. It was like, what type of father did you want when you were this age? And the person I wanted, I didn't have, right? Like my dad was not around when I was young. My stepdad stepped up and did the best he could, but he's still my stepdad, right? So it's not quite the same. And so for me in that moment, I was just like, this is not the father that I wanted when I was this age. And from that moment was, I need to go find a different therapist, because the one I was seeing wasn't working. Obviously, I need to start getting into why is he scared of me? Why is it the fact I'm angry all the time? And from that point on, it's been the driving force of being the father that I wanted at whatever age it is. So like my son, like I said, he's 11 now, my oldest. And excuse me, the thing that I try to work on is at 11, the one thing I didn't really want, but really needed, was a dad that was going to hold me accountable. He was going to hold me to task. This is what homework comes first. Then you're going to practice your instrument. Then you're going to do these. After all of that is done, then you can have some time on your iPad or the Switch or whatever it is that he wants to play. Because that's the thing I needed the most at that age.
Well,
so I guess, go ahead.
You said it's not what you wanted, right? At 11. And I don't disagree with you that, right, they're still developing as little humans, and their lizard brain is taking over everything, right? So you lay out a whole bunch of candy on a table or a steak and broccoli. What are the kids going to eat for dinner? All of the candy, every last piece of it, right? Their lizard brain doesn't want that, but them as humans want it. Humans want structure. They want discipline. They want to be led. The little kids, and I think that's what's going on with our societies. These little kids are not getting that, because it's easier just to be like, yeah, cool, don't worry about your chores. Just whatever. Just leave me alone. Get on your iPad. Go away. That's easier. So I think a lot of these parents aren't actual men or women. And now they're trying to raise children, and like Shaun's trying to raise good parents in his kids, and that's, I want to raise good adults. Both my kids, my daughter's, she's 10. She's been training jiu-jitsu since she was 5. She grew up on the mats as well. She's held to the same standard accountability wise as my son is. I don't treat them any differently. She's my little girl. He's my son. Do I give them slightly different lessons? Sure, because life's going to come at them differently. But she needs to be every bit as much of a mental, emotional, and physical savage as the boy does. Maybe even more so. because she is, she's going to be more likely to be prey to predators than my son. And so she shoots, both my kids shoot with me once a week. And they're on the mat doing jiu-jitsu every night of the week. And, kind of bouncing back to you, Shaun, and I'll tell you, I wish it was the case. I used to hold a lot of guilt about it. And I don't hold that much guilt about it anymore. But when my kids were born, I was like, all right, I'm ready to go deploy again, go back to war. What is this little thing? Yeah, it's cool. We made it. Here, mom, breastfeed it. I want to go back to war. It didn't change me. It really didn't, honestly. And I held a lot of guilt for it for years. What changed me, not just as a parent, but as a man, was when the COVID lockdowns happened here and they couldn't go to school. And so we were homeschooling them. Oh, well, whoa, it's time for me to step up. I can't just go off and just go to the gym and go shoot and go do what I need to do. I need to show up now for my kids. And so I was thrown into it, forced to do it. But then guess what? I started to enjoy it. I started to share these experiences with my kids where we're outside and I'm teaching them how to use a speed square and a miter saw and make these cuts. And we're building box planners. So we're doing carpentry projects and we're going fishing and we're doing marksmanship. And, I'm still teaching them dad stuff and man stuff to my son and daughter. But now we're sharing it as an experience. And I actually enjoyed, for the first time ever, I enjoyed being a father. And it changed me as a man as well, separately from being a father.
That's a beautiful point. I think understanding how much enjoyment you can get out of your kids of just watching them grow, but develop into the people that they are, I think is a beautiful thing. And going back to the topic of what a good man is, I think a lot of that comes back to enabling others to be them best selves, whether that be your kids or the people you work with or anything else. And I think that's a big one, because I know growing up and being in the military up here in Canada, there were a lot of people who thought I should be a certain way, that I needed to follow a certain line, that you should be doing this and then you should be doing that, and then But I don't think any of them ever really sat back and went, what is best for him, rather than what is best for the unit or what is best for the family or what is best for whatever, right? And I think as a good man is going to be looking for ways to raise up all the people around him, whether that's his kids, his family, his work, his colleagues, all those things. Shaun, you got any thoughts on this?
I don't have much to add other than just to recap just what I'm hearing right now. My own individual thoughts is this, that, man, the three of us could spend the rest of our lives sitting down and thinking about this subject deeply, and only this subject, nothing else, but just this subject. And we'd barely scratch the surface. We would barely scratch it. The subject is so complex and so deep and means so many different things to so many different people. Like my version of what a good man means to me versus my neighbor down the street, 7 houses down, 8 houses down, 12 houses down. It's all different. I think there's some universal commonality. I think that there's some positive things, what it means to be a good man. And some of those things have already been mentioned. But when it gets right down to the nitty gritty, we've all got different versions. And I think that often it's those differences that become the focus rather than the commonalities that become the focus. Like Greg has said, and I agree, we raised our kids absent of electronic devices well after their peers were mesmerized at the age of 3 and 6 and 12, mesmerized by the devices. We just didn't allow for that. We raised our kids differently. So does that mean I'm a good man or a bad man? It just means I'm a man who is doing his best. Like the mug says, and like Greg was talking about, none of us gets a free ride. None of us gets a ticket to ride. We've all got to earn our freaking ride, man. But we all earn it in different ways and at different times in our lives. Once you realize that it's time to pay, well, you either pay or you don't. And I've always tried to pay, but by doing my best is really helpful when it comes to regret. So, Greg can't change the regret of maybe not picking up his kid and thinking like, wow, my life is going to change right now. This birth moment, this is it. This is what it's all about. Like, he didn't experience that. He shouldn't be regretting that moment if he believes that in the moment he was literally doing his best to be a dad, doing his best to be in the moment. But he probably wasn't doing his best because he was probably in the future in his mind, overseas already. We all do it. We all freaking do it. I'm not jacking Greg up for what is common to all of us. I'll do it today. We'll all do it today. We'll all make mistakes today. But if I'm doing my best when I make my mistake, I'll have no regret. So to me, to be a good man, it literally requires you to do your best for yourself. So you've got no regret in the moment, no regret in the future about the past. And that will help present like a guiding force, if you will, for your own kids, for the people around you, for your peer group, for anyone who's observing. To be a good man, I think literally just requires that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. Greg, you got any thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's funny because I tell my kids, I have this phrase, just be good. Just be good. And I tell them all the time, right now you're a student. Your job is being a student in school. You're in school. Be a good student. Just be good. On the mats, right? Both my kids are pretty well more advanced than most of the kids on the mat. They've been training and competing for a long time. Be a good steward and a good ambassador of the sport and a good training partner. Be good. I tell them, hey, you want to grow up and serve. If your first job is serving, here's a good example. I was in a rush to get here today, right? I trained jiu-jitsu this morning at 5:45 with my team. I went home, had a conference call, made breakfast, had steak and eggs for breakfast, showered, had another couple conference calls, ran the dog, worked the dog, did some training with her. And then I had to race over here and I was like, I'm starving again. I need some calories. I need some food. So I stopped by Chick-fil-A. If I'm going to get fast food, if I got to go through a drive-through, I get Chick-fil-A and I just get a grilled chicken sandwich, right? And I make my order, grilled chicken sandwich with a bottle of water. And I drive off and I get here and it's a completely wrong order. And I'm like, just be good. I'm like, son, daughter, if that's your job, be good at it. Be good. If you want to be a trash man when you grow up, be the best trash man. Be good. Just be good at what you're doing. Just be good, and it doesn't take that much. Just be good, right? So it kind of goes along the same line of do your best. Do your best. Hey, Pop, well, what do you think about this? Well, is that the best you could do? Well, no, but I'm tired. Well, then no, it's not good. Do your best, right? Just be good. So
yeah, I love it. The fun part about this, and it's interesting that it came up kind of naturally, but I'm going to give everybody a bit of a spoiler here. Friday's topic for the collective is going to be the sword of Damocles, and there's this the guilt and the shame and the worry about like bad things going to happen, about what's going to happen in the future, or any of these other kind of concepts. But it usually stems from somebody not being in the moment, in themselves, being recognized, trying to do what's next or what was, rather than being here. And so I have one more video. We're going to play this one before we run out of time, and I want to get into this. So here we go.
The term warrior is an ancient term, archetypal, and every man is a warrior, and there's no place for a warrior in our culture. We're speaking about the archetypes here. We're speaking about the foundational character, what it means to be man today, what it means to be alive as a man. And one of the most important aspects of every man is duty. So many men, they never grow up. They're always looking somewhere to be taken care of. Just the whole life. No, cut that umbilical cord. With the soul, that's the way of the soul. That's where it begins. We don't blame anyone. That's also the way of the soul. Don't have time. When you're fully present, there's no time to blame anything or anyone. You're fully present to whatever that is. That's the way of the warrior.
Bam. Let's talk about it. Shaun, I'm going to hit you first on this one. What do you think?
Sure thing. So, interestingly enough, I was thinking about what it means. What is a good man? Of course, one of the things that is commonly attributed to being a good man is being a warrior, being a defender, being a sheepdog, being whatever. The buzzword of the day. And so, is that true? I think so. I think that there's many good men out there that couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag, but they're still good men. Now, it would behoove them to learn how to fight out of a wet paper bag, but that's a whole different subject. So, do you have to be a warrior to be a good man? No, you don't. But can you be a warrior and a good man? Yes, you can. And so then I started thinking about, well, is it just men that have the warrior spirit in them? Obviously not. Women do. But is there any science to the distinction between a man and a woman and the warrior spirit? Have there been any studies, any scientific studies? And as it turns out, not really. I mean, the spoiler alert is that there's very little difference between men and women in most things. Men have some, typical upper body strength add-ons and etc. But there's not a ton of difference. Some testosterone, this and that. But honestly, at the end of the day, the prescribed social differences are basically legends more so than they are facts. So now, back to the warrior thing. What does it mean to be a man? Do you have to be a warrior? Do you have to cut the umbilical cord with the sharpest, most dazzling sword in the world? No, you don't. You don't have to be anything. You just got to be what you are. And I think that is the struggle nowadays on what it means to be a good man, is most good men don't know what they are, never mind what they should be. And so therein lies the dilemma.
Bam. Greg, what do you got?
This kind of all, for me, it all goes back to, and I wish I had the actual study. So there was one study done that showed scientifically women are more capable of dealing with the stressors of babies screaming and crying than men. And men are more able to deal emotionally with the stressors of the sounds and effects of warfare and of of adults in agony and dying and etc. And I wish I had the actual study for you, but that's the only time I've ever heard of a study of showing the differences between men and women in what I would consider a warrior capacity. But this all takes me back to, Shaun, kind of what you said initially about being a good man being nuanced, right? So I believe that I agree with you 100% that I believe you can be a good man and not be able to fight, not be able to defend your family, right? Not be a warrior. But if you're a man of your principles and your morals and you stand by them, whether I agree with those principles, morals, ethics, whatever or not, you're a good man. Now, then we get into what I believe are attributes, right? Those nuances, what I believe attributes of a good man should be. And for me, obviously, I model my life in what I believe is the image of a good man. So I model my life where I make sure I'm very, very physically fit and capable. I make sure that I'm technically proficient and capable of defending not just my family, but society around me. Should something happen and women and children are there, right? I can defend that. I'm a man of, I say there's not kind of being transparent or kind of being honest. You're either honest and transparent or you're not, right? There's no sliding scale there. It's not, well, I'm kind of honest and I'm kind of, I am honest and transparent, maybe sometimes in business to a fault, right? Because you're going to know what I think. And so for me, that's the attributes or the nuances of what I believe Greg's image of a good man is. But that doesn't mean the guy that shows up and brings his son to jiu-jitsu, but doesn't fight and can't defend himself or protect his family, but he's got the right ethics, morals, principles. He's still a good man. He may just not be my version of what I think a good man should have attribute and nuance wise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm tracking on that one. I'm going to push back on you guys a little bit, I think. And the reason I do that is because when he talks about being a warrior, I don't think, at least in the video, I didn't take it as a physical warrior, as in I'm going to go to war. I looked at it as an archetypal position of as a good man should be able to, as you guys say, stand up for what you believe in, right? And whether that is physical, whether that is emotional, whether that is verbal, whatever it is, I would consider people that engage in debate to be warriors. I would consider people who engage in philosophy to be warriors, because what they're doing is fighting against the enemy, and the enemy is basically the unknown. It is chaos. You're trying to make sense of it in some way. And whether that is physical, like we do with jiu-jitsu, whether that is philosophical with, deep discussions, kind of like what we're getting into, or whether it's debate out on the street where people are just like, hey man, what do you think about this? I think a good man has to be a warrior of some type in the archetypal version of it.
Okay, I'm with you, and I agree. That's how I took the video. I really did. I didn't want to get into it this deep, but we're going to do it right here at the end of the show. You freaking...
You know how I do.
So you're right. However, why I didn't focus on that is because the term warrior then gets conflated into something else. So the guy who can't fight his way out of a wet paper bag because he holds his own in a debate, all of a sudden, now there's an assignment of he's courageous, he's a warrior. And so before you know it, someone who isn't ever going to focus on some of those other attributes that they need to shore up, they're going to focus on a attribute. They can talk in front of a microphone. They can debate with courage. Now all of a sudden they're a warrior. Now all of a sudden they're a hero. And conflate it all on the way up until at some point in the future, we've got a man, because we're talking about men, we've got a man who is representing a singular attribute they can debate as the representation of what it means to be a man. Now they're courageously debating. And so it's a slippery slope. You can debate and you can be a warrior, but I don't think just because you debate, you become a warrior. And so the devil is in the details, as they say. The nuance of what what I'm talking about right now is an entirely different show. We could go for 3 hours on that show about this particular subject. I appreciate what he was saying. I appreciate how you've defined it, Chance, and I agree with those definitions. The problem is when it becomes conflated.
Yeah, 100% agree. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, I would. You're spot on, Shaun. And I think at the end of the day, when we break everything down, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what TV show programs you're on. It doesn't matter what political office you hold. If you put a multi-billionaire in a room, the highest level politician in the room, a professional warrior fighter in the room, and say, figure it out, who's going to win? The end of the day, right? At the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, if societal constraints fall apart, right? Who is going to survive? Who's going to rise to the top? The most physically and proficient fighters and warriors. And I had this conversation not too long ago. I was with a bunch of businessmen, warriors in business, warrior entrepreneurs, right? If we want to use the term warrior. And these guys made millions upon millions. There's billionaires in the room. And one of the guys we disagreed on something. It was a normal conversation. He started doing this and puffing his chest out and raising his voice to where now he's yelling. I said, one, stop. I said, one, watch your tone, lower your voice. Because in my world, the next step when you're a grown man yelling at another grown man, the next step up is physical violence. And guess what? I'm way better at it than you are. So I don't care how much money you have. We can argue, we can debate, we can disagree, but you're going to speak to me with a normal tone and respect. Because the fact of the matter is you may be a billionaire and have conquered a warrior in business, but I'm a real warrior. I will put you to sleep. like I will, and so I agree with Shaun that, utilizing that term, it is, again, back to that whole word nuance. Then we start holding these guys. And honestly, Shaun, I think we're already there. We look at, our society looks at movie stars, movie TV stars. They look at politicians. Now with social media, they look at, they've got this many followers on Instagram, and they idolize these people. Right. And I think we're already there, that we look at these people as like warriors within their art because they've gained this popularity. And the fact of the matter is, you put them in a room with any one of the three of us and they're not warriors.
Although it would be pretty fun to watch the three of us in a room with an influencer. That would be fun.
Absolutely.
That's a side note. But I really love this, and I brought it up specifically. I knew Shaun was going to hit me back with this, and I love it. But the beautiful thing about this discussion, we said it right at the beginning, is the fact that we're all going to have our own versions of what it is, right? And I guess I want to end on this one before we get into some final thoughts. Is I think as Shaun says a lot, seek the adventure, right? If we're seeking consistently to be a warrior in whatever realm we're in, then I think that makes a good man. Like, if you want to go to war with your physical aspects, do it. If you want to go to war with your mental aspects, do it. You want to be a better speaker, you want to be a better father, you want to be a better husband, whatever. But by being a warrior in those realms, that's what makes you a good man, at least in my mind. So let's get into some final thoughts, because we're at just about an hour. And I just want to say thank you, Greg, Shaun. Great conversation. Really enjoyed this. Any final thoughts? Anything still bubbling in the back of your brain? What is a good man? What do you got, Greg?
I've got one thing, and this has been a topic that came up in the last couple of days for me, is we see a lot of these big muscular special operations guys. They've become more popular in modern civilized, whether it's, social media, TV shows, right? They're now like kind of idolizing this archetypal special operations warrior, these big, muscular, tattooed, beard. I'm literally I'm talking about us, right? I mean, look, we're all cookie cutters, right? I've seen more of these guys that they have this physical courage, this physical intestinal fortitude where, hey, we got a breach, we got to go through, cool, let's go. Yet when it comes to emotional courage and spiritual courage and intestinal fortitude, they completely fail. They falter. So it's like, hey, we're at the pub, we're going to get into a fist fight. Cool, I'm by you. We got to go and get into a gunfight. I'm by you. Oh, wait, I screwed something up bad, and now I've got to fess up and own that to my peers. Ooh, I can't do that. I'm going to hide. Ooh, I was maybe not as honorable as I thought in my relationship or with my kids or whatever. Ooh, I'm gonna hide in the shadows. I'm not gonna bring that up. I'm not gonna confront that. And you see a lot of these tough guys, but they lack. So again, going back to a good man, there's like a pie chart for me. There's a pie chart. I used to call it the complete combatant, right? And you draw a pie chart of all the different skill sets and attributes you should have as a complete combatant. And I think it's kind of the same thing as a good man. You have a pie chart, right? And you need to draw your slices of pie. But that doesn't just go to physical courage, physical capability. It goes to emotional courage, emotional capability. What's your EQ, your spiritual courage? And I only say this is something I've gotten into really in the last 4 to 5 years of my life. I meditate now. I microdose psilocybin pretty regularly. I see my therapist on the regular, and I think I'm a much better man for it. I'm much more emotional now. I'm much more passionate and compassionate now to my other fellow human, where I would say in the past, maybe was I a more capable warrior? Maybe, but I wasn't as good of a man. I wasn't as well-rounded.
Beautifully put. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Yeah, capable warrior versus capable human, two completely different things. One's one-dimensional, the other one is three-dimensional. And it's tricky, man. Do you know why it's tricky? Because when you're good at something, it's nice to keep doing the thing that you're good at. And to Greg's point, for none of us are influencers, I don't think, but there's people out there that have got the quintillion followers and they're all jacked up and all the tattoos and all of the trappings of modern social influence. If they're good at a thing, it's probably one thing, not everything. And so whatever you're latched onto when you're tracking that person, that influencer, that person who's inspiring you right now, if you think about it, they're probably not richly capable at a ton of things. They're probably capable at one or two things that you're latched onto. But they're not the right person to go and ask about maybe how to be humble or how to be whatever. Something that they're not good at, which is literally the case for every single human. Nobody is good at everything. So if you want to get good at something, what do? You go find people who are good at it. Not one person, but 100 people. Expand your network, expand your friend network, expand your social media network. Listen to podcasts that you've never listened to before to get some context, to get some perspective, to expand your horizons on what it means to be a good man to the person down the street versus your own limited idea of what it means.
Love it. I don't have a ton to add except what you just said, Shaun. Clicked up a quote in my head, and the quote is, "A jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one." And I think that goes into being capable across multiple lanes. And to the point, and we've made this before, you don't want to be a dabbler. You don't want to just touch on things. You got to be capable in all these things across the board. And I just love it. So, Greg, thank you very much. Again, great show, Shaun. Really great conversation. Love this. Don't go anywhere, though. Once the the trailer runs, stick with us. We'll carry it on. So as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, see y'all next week.
Thanks, guys.
Chimo.
Thanks, everybody, for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.